Hello and welcome to this week's This is MediaCity. I'm Stephen Chapman and today I'm joined by Sinead Rocks, who's come all the way over from Leeds, the new HQ of Channel 4, where she is Managing Director of Nations and Regions. Sinead, thanks for crossing over the Pennines to us this morning for This is MediaCity. Feel good to be, I'm going to say, back home again?
Yeah, it's been great. Did the usual, went straight into Costa, immediately bumped into someone I used to work with, actually back in London. So it feels like coming home.
And we've got a lot to talk about because obviously you have quite a history here at MediaCity, but obviously your new role is not new anymore, is it? For Managing Director of Nations and Regions at Channel 4, there's a lot to talk about there as well. I don't know if you've seen the podcast before, but we do start with random questions so that we can find a little bit more about you. Would you like to pick a card, any card?
Well, the luck I'm having this morning, this is not boding well.
You've not had a good start.
No, I've not had a good start.
Biggest claim to fame?
Biggest claim to fame. I once went through a period where I was working for the BBC. My staff job was in Belfast and I had an attachment in London, and it was, let's call it the glory days, where they give you a flight home every 2 weeks. And it really was the glory days, because I don't know whether I should say this or not, but it was business class. And I had a 2-week run where I sat beside one member of Westlife, which was very exciting because they were at their peak and the flight was delayed, so he was forced to talk to me for about 3 hours. And then on the next flight, I sat beside Vince Vaughn, who had had a very drunken weekend in Belfast and spent the flight telling me he was going to remake West Side Story and set it in the Falls on the Shankill.
Oh, wow. Okay. You were a reporter back then. Did any of that make it?
No, and I strongly advised against that as a next career move for Vince Vaughn, but the rest is history, yeah.
Fair enough. I'll give you one more.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. And best piece of advice?
Best piece of advice. I used to hate all the phrases about sort of networking and really putting yourself out there, because it felt so inauthentic to me. But actually, I think the best piece of advice is a softer version of that sort of networking point, which is just be nice to people, because you never know what job they'll end up in. So it's been a pleasure to have had such a long career and to see people who used to work for me now in really big jobs. So you end up getting this great network where you can call in favours or get advice. And I suspect if you hadn't been particularly nice to people along the way, they wouldn't take your calls.
Yes, you'd be blocked very quickly, wouldn't you? Now, let's talk about your role over in Leeds. Now, we're doing this kind of in partnership a bit with Prolific North, so that means I can get slightly beyond the boundaries of MediaCity here, although I know you have close links here. You moved to Channel 4, and it has been, you were at the BBC when they came up here. Yeah. What was the difference between bringing Channel 4 out of London to the BBC?
There's such different organisations in size and in structure. And while the BBC was a huge move of people, Channel 4 was a much smaller move of people, largely because it's a much smaller organisation. So Channel 4 obviously doesn't make its own content. Everything is commissioned from independent production companies. So the staff base is really quite tight. So while some people did move, really what the Channel 4 Nations and Regions push was about moving money. So moving commissioning power and spend out of London, helping grow the creative economy in the nations and regions, and trying to make that tangible difference really quite quickly. So it was much less, we did open beautiful offices, we did hire people to work in those offices, but it was much less of a lift and shift from London and more of, it's been described as the biggest structural change in Channel 4's history. So it was a very different concept. Ultimately still trying to do the same thing, create a public service broadcaster that's more representative of audiences across the UK as a whole, but a very different approach.
And how was I remember the news stories when the BBC was coming up here. I may have written some of them, but the news stories felt a little bit easier for Channel 4 coming up here. It was like accepted that it had to be out of London rather than the pushback on the BBC saying, why are you leaving?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were treated really kindly by the press because I think people could see that the intention and the intent behind it all was, I mean, you couldn't really argue with it. You don't want to be a broadcaster in this age particularly where you are making all your decisions from one particular part of the country where you have people who are getting, I mean, I'm being a bit facetious, but the same tube into work every day and drinking in the same bars. You don't want groupthink. You want to have a variety of opinions and viewpoints and people with different life experiences all feeding into your organisation because the decisions you make will be richer for that and you will be more representative of the UK in that way.
And Leeds was chosen.
Yes.
Don't worry. The look on your face there said, "Oh, he's going to talk about Manchester."
No. Do you know what it was? I saw Bev Craig yesterday,
who's the leader of the Manchester City
Yes, and I was showing her around our fabulous new Manchester office, which is in St Michael's. It's absolutely stunning.
And that's where your sales kind of.
Well, it's a bit of everything now,
everything?
and I'll tell you a bit about that shortly. And Bev was still harking back to the fact that Manchester didn't win the bidding process for Channel 4. I was like, can we move on? But yes, Leeds was chosen. It was chosen just before I joined, and I think that it was quite a compelling offer from the region as a whole because they got universities working together with the local authority. There was a reasonably mature production sector already in Yorkshire, but one we thought had the potential to grow, and a real appetite from all those different parties to have the Channel 4 move act as a catalyst to just take it to the next level. So yes, we have a lovely building in Leeds, right beside the train station, in the Majestic. Used to be a nightclub. I've met very many people who have told me sordid, terrible tales from it. Apparently, the Kaiser Chiefs song "I Predict a Riot" was inspired by that nightclub. So that tells you all you need to know about the history of our building.
That seems a perfect place for Channel 4.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. That takes you back to the very, very origins of Channel 4 itself, I would have thought. So in your role then, being out in the regions, obviously, but also nations as well, because you cover them too, have you noticed the difference in how Channel 4 looks and sounds since the arrival here?
Yeah, so... I mean, it's 6 years this week.
Well, that's why I thought that.
So, so I probably wouldn't have agreed to come on your podcast if I hadn't noticed a difference. We set ourselves an initial target of voluntarily making 50% of our main channel spend outside of London. And this was in 2019, and we said we'd aim to do it by 2023. And we hit that figure 2 years early, and have consistently hit that. So, it's very clear that we are working an awful lot more with production companies outside of London. We are working really hard to invest in the talent and the skills and the development side of things, always looking to see what barriers might there be for further growth, what can we do to remove them. And then I think that, that does come out on screen because we've, over the past 5-6 years, have been working with production companies we've never worked with before. So, the flavour of what you're putting out does change. And, we feel strongly that it has had a very positive impact on our content because it is more representative. And portrayal and representation are things we monitor and do research into to try and stay on top of, because as a public service broadcaster, albeit a commercial one, we have to represent our audience in their entirety.
And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but as a producer myself, there did seem, when you were in London, it was a very lads club. You had to be in a certain bar and there would be your commissioning editors sitting there. And if you weren't part of that set because you're outside the M25, it was like, they looked at you funny.
Well, it's funny because...
Has that changed?
Well, yes, because, I mean, when I first started, I spent a lot of time just talking to indies to try and work out, what... Is that a true experience? And they put it really, really well. There were indies from Scotland and from Manchester, Yorkshire and so on, who would say you'd have your slot to go down to pitch. And that's been a long time getting to that stage. And you'd be getting on the LNER or the Azuma. You'd be paying a fortune for a ticket. You'd have a very early start. You'd be carrying your life in a backpack. You'd look a bit dishevelled by the time, you got off the train and on the tube. And you're not starting what could be a life-changing meeting on the best foot. And then they say, you'd see the next people coming in after you who were swanning in with hot, steaming coffee, no coat on because they'd only walked around the corner. So even on that very simple level of levelling the playing field, not having to travel for those key meetings all the time to London has been a real game changer, is what indies have said to me.
Well, that's good. And I suppose if you look at some of the big indies that do stuff for Channel 4, Line over in Liverpool doing brilliant. There's Hollyoaks, Brookside Revival coming on
Amazing.
at the moment. We had Wise Owl Films on here the other day doing brilliant stuff over in Yorkshire as well. So it does look like it's kind of spreading the love a little bit as well. I know Lime from the very start with Phil, aren't they? But it's so. In terms of what's next on that, because there is a different style that Channel 4 is going through here, because I'm trying to get the words correct here, you're trying to be the digital first, is there too many firsts there? Digital first public sector, public service broadcaster. So does that mean the whole way that you're looking at how indies work with you is going to change as well, from the short form all the way through to the long form?
I don't think it fundamentally changes the relationship our commissioning team has with indies. I think it is about, if you are a commissioner at Channel 4, you're thinking what's going to work on our streaming platform, because that's where we want to grow the Channel 4 player, and we want to grow all the other, our YouTube presence and all the rest, at the same time as keeping the linear show on the road, right?
Because your streaming has gone crazy, hasn't it? The figures each time you release them, they seem to be going doubles and trebles and all sorts.
Yes, and that's essentially what our fast forward strategy is about, is growing that. And I think it changes, in some senses, the type of content the commissioners ask for. So we have doubled our investment in drama, for example, because we know when people are sitting down to watch something on a streaming platform, drama is one of the favourite genres. But I don't think it changes the relationship with indies. It puts a little bit of a spin, and there's probably a bit of a different content mix today than there would have been if you were to look at what Channel 4 was commissioning 10 years ago.
I suppose it's down to indies as well to start thinking.
That's it.
Beyond the linear.
Yeah.
Because part of your strategy, and it's kind of what we've discussed, across the UK, across the UK, that's someone else, isn't it? For all the UK, that's been your baby, is it? That's been the thing you've been really pushing. And do you think it's therefore there's more to do?
Yeah, I think
it's constant.
I think it is constant. So this year we've been very focused on the nations, bringing the amount of spend up in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and that's been going very well. Next year we'll have an increased focus on the English regions, and it's always just about pushing further. When we first hit the 50% content spend target, it was never a case of right, job done, we said we'd do it, we did it. It's about then looking at the kind of content that's making up that 50%. So a real focus for us, and I work really closely with Joe Street, who's our Director of Commissioning for the Nations and Regions. A real focus for the pair of us is, well, what do we need to do for indies outside of London to be winning higher tariff commissions?
So that's the more high-end television.
Yes, how do we get them to win commissions that are more likely to be returners? So you don't want to just hit your 50% through lower budget programmes or one-offs. It's about, if you want to grow your indie, you need that return business, you need that higher tariff output. So what can we do to help make that happen?
that kind of feeds into that sustainability thing, because back when the BBC were moving up, even before then, there was this XM25 thing, and there would be companies that say, oh yeah, we've got an office in Manchester, we've got an office in Liverpool or wherever, and it would be a phone somewhere, and therefore it wasn't actually bringing the talent up here or keeping the talent up here or training the talent up here. How do you make that so that we have sustainable sectors in the nations and regions? It's not just a big London, I'm not going to use the word indie because a lot of them aren't indie, are they? A big London company that kind of brings all its staff up, jumps them there for a couple of weeks, and then brings all the editing down to London again, and then it doesn't have an impact longer term in there.
Well, there's two things. Thankfully, Ofcom, as the regulator, has got some now clearly defined criteria as to what can be counted as out of London spend and what can't. But I would say that we've always been very cynical, and I had a brilliant moment a few years ago when someone from an indie asked to speak to me, and it was still when we were mainly doing Zoom and Teams. It was, just coming out of COVID, and he was English, but the approach had been, we've set up an indie in Belfast, and I spoke to him and I was like, are you in Belfast? What's the weather like? And obviously he wasn't in Belfast, and then his business partner also wasn't in Belfast, and then it turned out they hired a desk in a hot desking environment.
Oh.
So, I mean, and that was quite shameless saying that to me, of all people.
Yes.
So, we've always, I'm not based in London, Joe Street's not based in London. So we both left the BBC to go to Channel 4 because we were really passionate about the out of London thing. So it's kind of hard to pull the wool over our eyes.
And one of your big things is training and skills and provision, which again, I keep harking back to sustainability of the sector, but I think that's quite a big thing for you as well. How are you managing to get into all the colleges and universities and schools and to help people get both entry-level jobs and also kind of those senior jobs at broadcasters?
Yeah, so in 2020, so sort of 1 year into this For All the UK endeavour, we created something called 4 Skills, which was, instead of just having sort of sporadic training initiatives, which Channel 4 has always had a training provision, we decided to bring it all together, put more money into it, and really align it with For All the UK. So tie it very much to our own strategic needs and principles, and what we were finding at the time was sometimes commissioners for any broadcaster can use a lack of talent, a perceived lack of talent, as an excuse not to make something in the nations and regions, and 99% of the time it is a perception. So that was one of the first things we wanted to tackle. And then the second thing was, there were, and probably always will be, as content evolves and develops, skills gaps in certain parts of the country in certain areas. So, for example, we were moving one of our big titles to Bristol, and it required extensive casting experience. And there hadn't really been a programme of that type made in Bristol before. So
because Bristol was famous for science and
natural
nature, wasn't
history, yeah. So we invested money at that time on programmes that would build up a casting community. So that was sort of the genesis of it. It's back to that point of, how do you remove all the barriers to making the nations and regions piece really, really flow? And that 4 Skills piece has just really taken off. So it quickly went from sort of 1.5 million per year investment to 5 million. This year we'll have spent 10 million. And it's a very considered offering. So yes, we're in schools all over the UK. And that's really focused on opening up careers in the creative sector to young people just around the time they're making their GCSE options. And we focus on schools that have a higher percentage of free school meals. And it's trying to open up the world. You might not know that we need people who can do hair and makeup. You might not know that we need accountants. You might not know that we need lawyers. We need sparkies. We need people in construction. So it's a really lovely inspiration piece. And we try to match careers in the creative sector with young people's own interests and talents. Because, you know, what is that? What is the cliche? If you can't see it, you can't be it.
Yeah.
So we're very focused on that because we want our sector to be more diverse in terms of the socioeconomic piece. We do a lot of entry level, and that can be from apprenticeships to production trainee schemes, working with indies across the UK, because of course it's a joint endeavour developing talent. But over the past year, the thing I think that has really been a game changer is a program, a training program called Accelerate. So we've heard, and you'll know it well, over the past 2 years, the freelancer crisis.
It's more than 50% out of work.
I mean,
shocking
figures. So we thought we don't want to. There is no point increasing entry-level programs. What we are better doing is helping people already in the sector, in the nations and regions, to grow their careers, because there's another barrier here. You know, you want to make a program outside of London, you might have a commissioner saying, I don't know what that series producer's ever done before. I don't know what that exec has ever done before. So Accelerate is focused on giving people already in the sector, based in the nations and regions, their next step up. So we pay for them to double job. So it's additional budget to a Channel 4 programme, and you get your first series producer credit. And it's a proper, meaningful job. There's training attached to it, but it means you then get that credit on your CV, and hopefully then that is you making a supported step up. So when the series gets recommissioned, you're in line for that job. You don't have to ship someone up from London.
It's going back to your first answer about being nice again, isn't
That's
it?
right.
And that networking there. Because I think one of the, this isn't something on Channel 4's door necessarily, but one of the big problems is that when you're trying to appeal to young people on the free school meals, those of us, I did postgrad broadcast, and I had the fortunate that my parents could support me while I was starting my freelance career. But if you're looking at people who are on free school meals, they might not have that support, and it's almost impossible nowadays in the broadcast career to make that leap, because what do you do to earn money? Because broadcast careers are so short. Contracts, if they exist, are months rather than years, aren't they?
Yeah, but that's why apprenticeships are really interesting in our sector, and increasingly are becoming a really important part of the mix, because all our training opportunities are paid. We're socioeconomics are writ large right through the 4 Skills mission, because you can't afford to just go to London and start your way as a runner if you live elsewhere in the UK. I'm of the generation that was very lucky. I did a postgrad in London, I got a grant and I got my fees paid, and that's unheard of these days. So, hopefully it's removing barriers and giving people life-changing opportunities.
This isn't your part of your role, but I'm going to just ask you the question anyway. Do you think that might change now that Channel 4 is going to start owning IP and making its own stuff? Because up until now, Channel 4's relied on advertising funding. That's quite difficult in a crisis that we're currently in. Everything changed. You arrived at Channel 4 at a very exciting time politically. I'm going to use the word exciting in inverted commas.
I'm happy with that.
A diverse range of culture sectors over that time. And everything changed. And one of the things that had to change was how you're being funded, and how you don't own IP. That means that when you make a show, you can't make a show, but so therefore you don't be able to sell it to other territories like BBC Studios can or ITV can. And the argument was that that's quite a big chunk of money that you're not allowed to by the creation of Channel 4. It was legally you couldn't do that. With that being removed, it's great for Channel 4, but obviously indies at the same time are going, hold on a minute, Channel 4 was the one that we could rely on. How difficult is that tightrope that you guys have got to walk across now?
Well, it is obviously a sensitive subject the way you have just described it, but I think but I'm not disagreeing with you.
Okay.
But Indies will continue to be the lifeblood
Yeah.
of Channel 4. I mean, and that's a simple fact. We will still always commission the vast bulk of our content from indies. But you're right. The market's changing, the world is changing, and as a public service broadcaster, that it is reliant on is commercially funded. We have to look at revenue diversification, and IP is a part of that. So when the legislation changed to allow us to explore this area, we decided to take a twin track approach. And the first is an evolution of our Indie Growth Fund, which is the Creative Investment Fund. So, we have for many years invested minority stakes in indies to help them grow, really.
And some of them have grown phenomenally after it.
Absolutely. And then we sell our bit. And
were you? I'm trying to think. At the Warp, and what have they done recently? Adolescence,
absolutely.
Isn't it? So
yeah, we're really proud of our association with Warp and the Indie Growth Fund. So the Creative Investment Fund takes that to the next level, which is about buying majority stakes and eventually potentially owning our own indies. We've started with the acquisition of Firecrest, the brilliant Scottish-based, Glasgow-based production company. But we don't have a massive shopping list and we don't have a massive bank account. So that's not going to be, we're not going to be like the next Sony or even BBC Studios in that regard. So that's the first approach. And the second approach is slowly moving into in-house production ourselves. And anyone who has ever run an indie or worked in production will know that trying to find a hit that will make you money from IP is like panning for gold.
Yeah.
And it won't happen overnight. And so it really shouldn't be seen as a threat to the independent production community, because our heart and our intent is very much now what it was in 1982, which is we do exist to work with independent companies the length and breadth of the UK.
And the opportunity, I suppose, is the other way of looking at it is when you talk about the sustainability and young people coming through and people, if you have those indies and you are a national broadcaster backing it, that potentially gives more help to the regions and nations, young people and people that... Absolutely
right. And then the simple fact is, it is in the interests of every indie that works for Channel 4, for Channel 4 to be financially sustainable and in robust financial health.
Our programme budgets go higher, no?
Thankfully not my decision to make. So, Channel 4 evolving its business model in a sensible and pragmatic way to help it survive in challenging economic times is actually in everybody's best interest. And it's on us to make sure that it is measured. It's on us to make sure it is properly run and that it's done in a fair and equitable way.
Right, let's make it easier for you now.
Go on.
Let's talk about BBC.
Go on.
Let's talk about how you got to Channel 4 to start with, because you have a big role, or you had a big role here at MediaCity back in the day. See, pressure's already lifting, isn't it? I'm not putting you on the spot here. What was it like kind of landing here and seeing this MediaCity beast to grow?
I had a really interesting transition from London. So when I was in TV Centre working at BBC Children's, and I knew that BBC Children's was moving. I don't think at that point we knew whether it would be Manchester or Salford, but we knew it was moving north. And then I got a different job that was actually based in Manchester. So I moved to Manchester about a year ahead of the big move. And so I was based at Oxford Road. Which was like, were you ever in Oxford Road?
I worked at GMR
Did you?
for a while there, yeah.
It really reminded me. Do you remember the TV show Life on Mars? Smoky glass. And
it was unique in many ways, wasn't it? To go from Oxford Road to MediaCity BBC, you're moving centuries, it felt, didn't it?
Yeah.
You could just walk in pretty much to BBC Oxford Road, couldn't you?
Yeah.
But it was a funny old place.
So I initially worked there And then I changed jobs and moved to the Learning and Education department, which hadn't moved yet, so had to go back to London for a bit, and then helped move that department up here. So I'd seen it from lots of different angles, and I'd seen this amazing complex. When you had to wear hard hats and steel toe cap boots and wandering around with Peter Salmon and Alice Webb.
Who's back again?
Who's back again? Yeah, can't keep her away. So yeah, it was just hugely exciting. But also, like, incredibly difficult. When I was editor of Newsround, my deputy loved his job, but had 4 kids and a wife down south, and people would say to him, "So you're leaving Newsround?" He'd say, "No, Newsround is leaving me." So relocations are difficult. There's a human cost to them, but there was a great sense of excitement about this and about the potential.
And working in children as well, you mentioned Editor Newsround. Well, did you help launch it?
I launched on the
CBBC channel,
yeah,
and then became editor, and then you launched Rip Off Britain, which I think I'm allowed to say records down there. I don't know if I am. We'll find out when it gets edited down. There'll be a beep.
Yes.
Records. So you've had quite a lot of influence over the years here, and you kind of shot through the ranks all the way through at BBC and did some.
I don't know if you can say you shot through the ranks if it took 23 years, but...
Well, I mean, it's from editor of Newsround to creator. It feels a little bit like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, my last job was Director of Education, which was a lovely job to have. Because we had everything from Bite Size to BBC Food at that time. You worked with the main channel commissioners to co-commission content that had educational value. So that was a really great job because it sort of took you beyond your immediate department and let you have more of a view of what was happening elsewhere in the corporation.
And as someone, as we start to wrap up, as someone who has worked across the nations and regions, which is good if you've got a job like yours, and has seen the BBC move up and being a big part of that, and Channel 4 move up on the other side. How do you think we're getting towards a stage when we have this all across? I'm trying to mix your 2 words, but
go with the one that came first, which is for all the UK.
For all the UK.
Yeah.
That sounds a really good phrase. But do you think, as a broadcasting screen sector, we are getting there now?
Yes, I mean, massive progress has been made, and it's so brilliant walking around MediaCity this morning and just saying, because MediaCity got a lot of knocks at the beginning, which was, you just shipped everyone up and you haven't created enough opportunities and we haven't seen the output, but when you let things bed in, when you let things grow and evolve, the impact is undeniable. So yes, massive progress. The media landscape from a nations and regions point of view is unrecognisable from what it was 10 years ago. Totally unrecognisable from what it was when I started in BBC Northern Ireland in the 90s. But there will always be more to do. Always. There are still, the vast majority of creative decision makers for the UK's media are still based in London. Let's just keep, pushing that boulder up the hill to really make that a bit more of a mixed ecology.
And final question, which is kind of a leading question, I think, but it has been a turbulent few years for Channel 4. How are you feeling about the future?
It's exciting, right? Because our fast forward strategy is paying off. We had our highest ever day on our streaming platform in October. We are really, really seeing that pivot to digital paying off in volume. Masses of 16 to 34-year-olds, which is what you want. Breaking our own records with long form on YouTube. So we feel like our strategy is working. That's always a good start. And we're going through a period of change in terms of leadership. We've just had a new chairman join, a new CEO will be appointed in due course, and so it's exciting whenever change is forced on you, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to get a shake-up, you're going to get a different perspective, you're undeniably going to get an injection of fresh energy and new ideas. So I think Channel 4 is in a great place, and it's just a pleasure to work for a broadcaster that people love. You know, Channel 4 from my generation was such a huge part of their lives, and yet they're still tuning in now to watch Married at First Sight or Educating Yorkshire. You know, anytime I go to Belfast, and I'm there shortly for the media festival, people still talk about Derry Girls. You know, absolutely life changing. So I think we're in another period of change. It was ever thus, but I think it's an exciting one.
Fab. We'll leave it at that. Thank you ever so much for racing across the Pennines to see us.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for watching and listening to this week's This Is Media City, which is a 39 Pictures production on behalf of Media City and in partnership with the University of Salford, and the support today from Prolific North. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and we shall see you next week. The production team are Meg Bond, Tegan Easton, Akila Hewitt and James Young.